Howie Roseman has had a track record of targeting Georgia Bulldogs over the last few years in the draft, and it's panned out. What are some other colleges that he could hone in on their prospects this year? Coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. I'm your host, Louis DiBiase. Welcome in to this Thursday edition of the show. We are brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL in all capital letters for $20 off your first purchase. Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, Keely Ringo, the Philadelphia Eagles have benefited from targeting the Georgia Bulldogs' historic all-time defense that won back-to-back national championships in 2021 and 2022. It has remade this defense. It has remade this era of Eagles football. I think it was one of the huge reasons they were able to bounce back from a massive collapse in 2023. Having those championship experienced players that know how to handle success, know how to handle adversity, even in their early years in the NFL, was instrumental. And not just on the field, how dominant those players were, but Jalen Hurts mentioned it himself during the playoff run. What helped them turn things around in 2024 from a culture perspective? He talked about having so many Bulldogs on the defensive side of the football, having those guys close, having them mature so young, having them be really good leaders in the locker room, stepping up when Brandon Graham went down, when Fletcher Cox retired. Howie Roseman's decision to target that historic unit helped this team in tremendous ways, both on and off the field. This year, I think there are some schools, and Georgia's going to be one of them for sure. There are some schools that Howie can hone in on again, or maybe it's a new school that he hasn't really took prospects from. These schools have many different players he could target, and I think he's going to have success if he goes after these schools. So I have five schools, I should say, that I really think Howie Roseman, if he takes a player from that college, if he goes, I think he could double dip at some of these universities. I think we're going to be looking back at the 2025 NFL draft saying, Howie did good yet again. The number one team I really do think is Georgia. And I'm not just saying this because Howie the last three drafts has really tried to get as many Georgia Bulldogs as he can. And he's done it in free agency as well. This year, signing Azeez Ojulari to rotate in that edge rusher group. But when you look at how many prospects are coming from the Bulldogs this year, and I think there's not just defensive players, but there's offensive guys as well that they could really use on the offensive line. I think there are 4 to 5 prospects the Eagles could take that would continue this trend of Bulldogs turning to Eagles and really helping this football team. On the offensive line, there's 2 guys on day 2 that I really think could be your starting right guard in 2025. Tate Ratledge and Dylan Fairchild, who, by the way, did meet with the Eagles, I believe it was last week or early this week. Fairchild, I think, is more projected to be a mid to late third-round pick, whereas Tate Ratledge, I would say, is more of a late second-rounder, an early third-rounder. I actually took him in our Mock Draft Monday episode on Monday with the 64th overall selection. I think when you look at what the Eagles need at right guard, some competition for Tyler Steen and Kenyon Green, maybe the starter over those 2 guys. And if you're looking at the draft to add that player, and you're not looking for after the draft, looking for another Mekhi Becton, but you're not fully sold on Kenyon Green and Tyler Steen, there are 2 Georgia Bulldogs that I could absolutely see the Eagles being interested in, Tate Ratledge and Dylan Fairchild. And not just those 2. When you look at the defense, there's a lot of players that the Eagles could really benefit from adding. I think 2 of them likely will not be available, right? Jalen Walker, Daniel Jeremiah just posted his new updated top 50 prospects for this year's draft class. Walker is number 5. I think he's going to go top 10. Likely people are going to see him and say, this guy might have a Micah Parsons type of ceiling. But maybe there's a scenario where people don't know where to use him, and it allows him to drop just a little bit. Teams might prefer a James Pierce or a Shamar Stewart or Mikel Williams, who's also an option here. with the Georgia Bulldogs, another edge rusher that has just ridiculous size and length and power, really good against the run. Jalen Walker could fall. Maybe it is Mekhi Williams because there are so many good pass rushers in this year's first round. Maybe based on just pick your poison personal preference, maybe it allows one of these guys to slip down the board a little bit to where the Eagles could make a trade up. There's no way either one of these guys fall to 32, but I don't want to say, even though it's very unlikely, I don't want to say it's impossible that Jalen Walker or Mekhi Williams will not be in striking distance for the Eagles, because looking at the Eagles' history the last few years, I thought there was no chance Quinyon Mitchell was going to be available in the 20 to 32 range. I thought there was no chance that two Georgia Bulldogs in 2023 would be available with their top 12 pick, let alone the 30th overall selection for Nolan Smith. And then the fact that Jalen Carter slipped outside the top 5 and fell to number 9 is unbelievable. So I don't want to say there's no chance they get this player because the draft is so unpredictable, but I think it's a long shot. But if one of those two were available and you could add them to this already Georgia-filled Eagles defensive line, I think you just continue with this trend. I think it would work out tremendously. Mekhi Williams, with how big and long he is and how good he is against the run, I think he would be the perfect Josh Sweat replacement to go with this, I would say, more undersized, faster, speed-based edge rusher group that Vic Fangio has right now. And not just them, but Malaki Starks. You could make the argument Malaki Starks could come in right away, day one, and make the biggest impact for 2025. Maybe not long-term, but for 2025, you could make the argument Malaki Starks would improve this football team more than anybody you add in the first round. That is the biggest hole in the defense right now, is that starting safety position with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson traded to Houston. So between Rutledge, Fairchild, Williams, Walker, Malaki Starks, there's some late-round players as well I like on both sides of the ball from Georgia. You add one of these guys or a couple of them, I think that trend, if you continue it, you're going to feel pretty good about the results. Number 2, Ole Miss. Just give me one of those pass rushers. Princely Umanmielen, J.J. Pajeas. Maybe even you go for a corner like a Trey Amos on day 2 or a Trey Harris at wide receiver. I think they can benefit as well from Jackson Dart going in the first round. Maybe if he falls to 32 and a team like Pittsburgh wants to come back in, or Cleveland or Las Vegas or New York, they want to come back in to get Dart and get that fifth-year option like Baltimore did with the Eagles in 2018 for Lamar Jackson. Even Jackson Dart, the Eagles could benefit not from taking him, but an Ole Miss prospect could help them out on day 1. But between Princely Umanmielen and J.J. Pajeas on day 2, Walter Nolan, if there's a way he slips so you can trade up to go get him, I would love to grab one of those Ole Miss defensive linemen. And I know they're not going to take a corner probably with their first 2 picks, but I love Trey Amos. Like the length, the physicality, the press man coverage. Like he's my type of corner. I love his ability to go after the ball in contested catch situations. There's a lot of good players on that Ole Miss team that I personally would target. And then number 3, I would say, is Texas. And I should say Ohio State, and then Texas at 4. I want to talk about Texas first, though. Texas has players at positions that I think people would see more as a luxury pick for the Eagles, but they're specific prospects that are my guys. Matthew Golden and Isaiah Bond at receiver. Golden's going to be a day 1 pick. Bond's going to be a second-round selection. The speed combination of those two, if you're looking to add a field stretcher, a run-after-the-catch weapon, potentially if Dallas Goedert's gone, to complement Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, to rotate through with Jahan Dotson, I think you could target the Longhorns offense. If it's not Matt Golden, who might at this point be a top 10, top 15 pick, maybe you like Isaiah Bond in that second or third round. I think Texas, again, they don't have a lot of players at positions the Eagles need, but from a BPA perspective, best player available, they've got some really intriguing players, like 2 defensive backs that I really like, Jahdae Barron and Andrew Makuba. I think Barron's more of a corner safety hybrid. Makuba is definitely a safety. You look at tight end, Gunnar Helm. If the Eagles miss out on, Mason Taylor, Colston Loveland, Elijah Arroyo, Harold Fannin, and they want that above the rim type of complete tight end that can block well, but he's tall, he can be a red zone threat, Gunnar Helm's a good player as well. So for Texas, it's more of the flashy positions, defensive backs, weapons on offense. But if you're looking for that kind of player on day 2, Texas has a lot of options. And Jahdae Barron, low-key becoming a favorite of mine for a potential day 1 pick, because he's not just a corner. This is a safety, corner, nickel hybrid. If you add him with Cooper DeJean, That would be a fun combo. Ohio State, as I mentioned, the national champions, ton of prospects, especially on the offensive side of the football. Look, if you want a high floor clutch pass rusher on defense, Jack Sawyer, JT Tumalo, good players to add maybe on day 2 in the 3rd round. But on offense, I think Donovan Jackson, the versatile interior offensive lineman that can also play tackle guard hybrid, he's a favorite for me. I think, like, gun to my head, name 3 prospects the Eagles are very likely to draft in the 1st round. It's one of those 2, or one of those 3. Donovan Jackson would be one of those 3 prospects. And then, I'm just saying, there's no way. I don't believe the Eagles will draft a receiver in the 1st round. But let's say, again, they want to replace Dallas Goedert if he's gone with a receiver, a possession receiver that can play inside, a good blocker, a possession player over the middle of the field, a good route runner, just like a really solid safety blanket for Jalen Hurts. Not that he doesn't have many of them, but another one. Emeka Egbuka, he'll be available in that 20 to 32 range. So Ohio State's an interesting one, especially on offense. And then the last school that I really like that I think Howie Roseman could target is the Oregon Ducks. I think there's 2 defensive linemen that I think would be intriguing. Derek Harmon, the defensive tackle, on day 1 is a good option if you're just sitting there at 32. If he falls, I think that's a good value pick there. A good player in a rotation to complement Moro Ijoma and Jordan Davis next to Jalen Carter. Jordan Birch is someone I love his traits. 6'5", really explosive, raw, doesn't have the college production, kind of a poor man's Shamar Stewart in this class. But if you're looking for upside, looking for a guy to rotate through and to develop his skills, if you're targeting more of a ceiling, Jordan Birch is an explosive player that you can use creatively. Maybe you send him through the A-gap and B-gap, a stand-up player, more of a Jalix Hunt than a Josh Sweat type of prospect. But I think Oregon is interesting too. And they have some late-round prospects as well that I like. Tez Johnson at wide receiver, a good separator that's a little undersized. Jabir Muhammad, a good slot defensive back if you need a good backup to replace Avonte Maddox behind Cooper DeJean. The Oregon Ducks, I don't think any of these schools are all that surprising because most of them were in the college football playoff. But if Howie Roseman targets Georgia, Ole Miss, Ohio State, Texas, and Oregon, odds are you're going to get a pretty good prospect. And I think he could double dip. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes with, let's say it's Malachi Starks and Tate Retledge from Georgia, or it's Walter Noland and Princely Umanmielen. Maybe he goes back-to-back Ole Miss players, or he takes Donovan Jackson and then Jack Sawyer from Ohio State. Let's say he goes Jahdae Barron and then Isaiah Bond from Texas. I doubt it. Or he takes Gunnar Helm. I think a lot of these schools, you could actually consider double dipping like they did with Georgia in 2023. And I think you could do pretty well. Again, one strength of Howie Roseman lately is just keeping it simple. Sometimes, not always, the school doesn't always mean, don't scout the helmet. The school doesn't always mean the player is going to be better because we know it's 2025. Studs come from everywhere. Quinyon Mitchell came from Toledo. Right? But I think Howie Roseman's been a better drafter because a lot of the times now he's just taking the best players from the best schools and the best athletes from those schools, and that works out a lot, right? In such an unpredictable talent evaluation process like the NFL draft, sometimes keeping it simple like that can really pan out. And so taking a guy from one of these schools, I think the probability of those guys hitting, it's pretty good. It's pretty likely. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, let's get into prospect versus prospect as we do every Tuesday and Thursday. What player could the Eagles add that would improve the roster the most in 2025 compared to 2024? Is there a rookie that could come in and be a potential upgrade from what they had last year? 2 prospects, who is more likely to be an upgrade than the other? We'll get into that coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. This episode of Locked On Eagles is brought to you by Gametime. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd, and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. I will never forget my first Eagles game at the Link 2017, Monday Night Football. Carson Wentz throws for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. The Eagles are 9-1 on top of the world. There's nothing like it. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Gametime comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. I just checked the Gametime app. There's some amazing deals already, not just on sporting events, but concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Their lowest price guarantee will actually credit you 110% of the difference if you find better prices on another platform. and you're not going to. Plus, there's just so much peace of mind with Game Time. On top of the lowest price guarantee, they also have the seat views before you buy and no surprise fees, so you can book with total confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, time now for prospect versus prospect right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. So today's perspective of this segment, it's going to be more about just 2025 in a vacuum. Yesterday we talked about what rookie could you add that would take on the biggest role, right? And we mentioned how if they lose Dallas Goedert, tight end's the biggest hole to fill, maybe on the roster, right? Because there's no obvious starter there. Whereas like right guard, there could be. Tyler Steen, Kenyon Green. Safety, there could be. Sidney Brown. Corner, there could be. Keely Ringo. You have Moro Ijoma and Jalix Hunt as options in that defensive line rotation. So tight end would be, I think, the biggest one. Then like right guard, safety. So those are the players that could come in through the draft that could fill the biggest hole for 2025. But I was thinking about it today from a different perspective. What rookie would come in and make the biggest impact on this team? Not fill the biggest hole, but make the biggest impact and potentially even be an upgrade over what they had in 2024, which is a tough ask because the 2024 Eagles, it's one of the best teams in NFL history. You can make the argument it's the best team of all time. It's one of the most complete rosters you will ever see an NFL team put together. But is it possible? Like, what players could come in and be that upgrade? Well, I have a wheel of random prospect names. We're going to spin it. 2 players who could potentially be a bigger upgrade and make the biggest impact on this team in 2025. Let's get into it. Let's start this thing up. All right, so our first spin, and I have some prospects on both offense and defense for this scenario. And number 1, we have, wow, fascinating. We were just talking about him. Texas defensive back, Jahdae Barron. He's the first option for upgrades in 2025. Let's see who we got at number 2 here. Looks like it's going to be an offensive player. North Dakota State interior offensive lineman, Gray Zabel. So of those 2 prospects, Jahdae Barron from Texas, the cornerback safety hybrid, plays more corner, but some project him more to be a safety. Very Cooper DeJean vibes from 2024. Between Jahdae Barron, the Texas defensive back, and Gray Zabel from North Dakota, the versatile guard, center, tackle, pretty much played everything with the Bison. Who could be potentially an upgrade for the Eagles in 2025? An upgrade that would also make a bigger impact than the other prospect. I think Gray Zabel fills a bigger need. I think Gray Zabel comes in right away, would likely be your starting right guard. I think over Tyler Steen and Kenyon Green. Like, I think he is a top 20, top 25 prospect. I don't think he'll even be available with 32. There's no way that he gets past the Chiefs, in my opinion, at 31. You'd probably have to do like a small trade up to go get him. I think between the 2, obviously Zabel fills a bigger need because if Jahdae Barron's going to play corner at the next level, the Eagles have Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. They have Keely Ringo. If he's a safety, they do have Reed Blankenship. They do have Sidney Brown. So Zabel would come in right away and have a better chance to have a bigger role. But I think when we're talking about impact this year, when we're talking about like high level of play and potentially being an upgrade over what you had last year, I actually would lean more Jahdae Barron. Because when you look at it, is Gray Zabel, or not even if it's just Zabel, but if it's like Tyler Steen or Kenyon Green, is anybody going to be an upgrade at right guard over what you had last year with Mekhi Becton? No. Like, Mekhi Becton was unbelievable last year, and it allowed him to cash in with the Chargers in free agency. So Zabel could come in and fill that hole, and, you know, he could be a really good player. So he fills the need. But Barron, I think if he comes in and is that Swiss Army knife, safety corner, just matchup hybrid that you're playing in this robber role, right? And he's in like dime looks, like with Nakobe Dean out, you've got a package out there of, and it's exciting to think about, of, you know, Keely Ringo on the outside and Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean and Jahdae Brown are in the box. And then you have Reed Blankenship and Sidney Brown deep. Like, those are your 6 defensive backs out there. That's a really fun package. And Barron is such a competitive player. He is willing to get his nose dirty in the run game. He is instinctual. He is explosive. He covers receivers, he covers tight ends, he covers running backs. Like, he's a playmaker. And although Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Darius Slay were really good for this team last year, and I'm furious still that CGJ is not going to be an Eagle in 2025, 6 interceptions walking out the door and a ton of energy. I do think Barron could be seen, like, if he comes in and has a Quinyon Mitchell or Cooper DeJean like rookie year, there's a chance that defensive back you add could be seen as an upgrade over, depending on what his role is. If he's playing outside corner, let's say he beats out Keely Ringo, or Cooper DeJean's playing outside and Barron's that slot guy, like, you could see Barron being an upgrade over Darius Slay. You could see him being an upgrade over what they had in Chauncey Gardner-Johnson last year. Like, Chauncey was amazing, but was he an all-pro player last year? No. He had 6 interceptions, but Chauncey still had his limitations. Like, he struggled as a tackler in the first half of the year. Wasn't the best one-on-one coverage safety. Like, Barron would be seen as an upgrade when it comes to a coverage safety, if that's the role he's playing. Barron could be seen as an upgrade over Slay, who was good last year, but he wasn't great. I would say between the two, Gray Zabel fills the bigger hole, but Jahdae Barron, I think, is the funner idea, the more fun idea, I should say. And I think he would be seen as the bigger upgrade, potentially, to what you had in 2024. And I'm quietly becoming a big fan of the idea of bringing Barron in. Like, if you have 2 Swiss Army knives like that in the defensive backfield, a Cooper DeJean and a Jahdae Barron that you can use as a matchup nightmare, and you move them all across the formation, it would really make this defense hard to diagnose. If you're an offensive coordinator, if you're a quarterback, like, Barron is such a good player. I think you'd have to trade up a little bit, but I would love to add another, like, between him and Nick Emenwari and Malachi Starks. Like, give me that versatile defensive back. I want to run more dime looks this year. I really do. I don't know if Vic Fangio does, but the first half of the year, or however long Nakobe Dean's out, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., I think, will fill those shoes pretty well. I'm excited about him in year 2, but I want to see more DB looks this year, and I think I just like having that optionality. I like having versatile players on defense, and Barron's an exciting watch. Just from a BPA, best player available perspective, I think he's going to be one of those best players still on the board from that 20 to 32 range. So Zabel fills the biggest hole, but I think the biggest impact for 2025, the upgrade compared to 2024, that'd probably be Barron. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, let's have some fun to finish off this Thursday edition of the show. Let's talk jerseys. So the owners' meetings were this week in Florida. Some new rules have allowed more flexibility for uniforms in 2025. The Eagles posted an awesome tweet yesterday, a jersey game that we're going to play, and I got some ideas for some new jerseys, so we'll get into that coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. All right, so we know this week the owner meetings took place. Some new rules have allowed for teams to now wear, instead of it being twice a year, teams can now wear their alternate, potentially vintage jerseys 4 times in a season. The NFL is also allowing for more flexibility when it comes to alternate helmets being used with their classic home and away jerseys. So the NFL, for years, they've been sticklers, very old school about jerseys. Up until 2023, you were not allowed to wear more than 1 helmet. And that's why the Eagles were never able to bring back the Kelly Green look. And Jeffrey Lurie's been fighting the good fight on this topic since 2017. Finally got what we wanted with 2 helmets. But it was only 2 helmets. Now it's 3. So the Eagles have the midnight green helmet, Kelly Green, and the black helmet, right? But they still were only limited to wearing those a couple times a year. And you can't wear them in the playoffs, which is still a rule I want to see change, because how cool it would be to see the Eagles wearing Kelly Green in the postseason. But this week, more progress was made. So now you can wear alternate jerseys 4 times a year. And you can mix and match helmets. They like the NFL likes that classic branding, so they didn't want to touch the classic home and away jerseys. But now they are bringing it more to a college football type of style, more a soccer, college football kind of freedom when it comes to jerseys. And thank God, because, the NBA, the NHL, pretty much every other league, football was still very in that baseball realm with jerseys where it was too restrictive. Whereas like college football, you can wear 30 different combinations all year and it doesn't matter. Like same with soccer. I mean, soccer teams that are red and black are wearing purple jerseys. Like it's chaos and I love it. Same with the NBA, like the the vintage hardwood, courts. I mean, those are awesome to see in all the classic jerseys. The NHL too, like they had their reverse retros. It's just awesome ideas that the NFL was just far behind on. Well, now again, they are getting creative. They are getting a little more open-minded. So the Eagles can wear the Kelly greens up to 4 times now, and they can wear their black jerseys. What I love is they can also now wear their black helmets with, let's say, the midnight green jersey. Or I would love to see a game where they wear the black helmet, a white jersey, and the black pants. Like what they wore in Brazil, the black helmet. Give me that with like the all white look, or give me the black helmet with the white jersey, with the green jersey, with like black pants. I love the different combinations. And the Eagles actually posted a tweet that was a lot of fun that a lot of fans were interacting with on Eagles Twitter. I want to get into this. So they said of these 9 jersey combinations the Eagles have had in their history, you can only keep 3. What are the 3 that you would pick? So for me, I'm going with, and these are interesting for our audio listeners. Number 1 is the 90s classic Kelly green white jersey. Number 2 is the all-white current jerseys they have. Some call them the preseason uniforms. I like them a lot more than others. Number 3 is the black helmet, the white jersey, and the black pants they wore in Brazil. I want more of that. I want to see black helmets with the green jersey. Number 4 is the classic home uniform. Number 5 is the Kelly green jersey. Number 6 is actually what they wore against the Giants this year, a green helmet, the white jerseys, and the black pants. And then at the bottom, this is interesting, number 7, they had the all midnight green look. Midnight green helmet, midnight green jersey, midnight green pants. And then they have the black jerseys at 8 and 9. Black helmet, black jersey, black pants. Number 9, green helmet, black jersey, green pants. Of these 9, if I could keep 3 jerseys for the Eagles to wear for the rest of time, I would say it's, honestly, number 4, you got to keep the classic midnight green look. I mean, that's just the Eagles. That's their winning jersey. They've won 2 Super Bowls in that jersey. They've been to 4 different Super Bowls in that uniform. Like, that to me is the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think the teal midnight green look is getting better year after year. You got to keep number 4. Number 5, the current Kelly green look is incredible. It's one of the best looking jerseys of all time. I think it's the best looking jersey the Eagles have. You got to keep that in the rotation. And then the third one for me, I just love those 90s Kelly green jerseys. Like, they are just so perfect. The Randall Cunningham look, the aesthetic, the aura is just, as the kids say, the aura. It's incredible. I would keep that as the third jersey. And now again, with the NFL like being more flexible with jersey rules, maybe you can bring back the white Kelly green look, the 90s look. Maybe you can bring back the white helmet, even from the 70s, the white helmet with the green wing. I think there's more possibilities, and I think the Eagles are getting more open-minded with it year after year. Like last year, they did the black helmet, white jersey, black pants look. I think that's awesome. Maybe this year you do the black helmet with the all-white look. I think number 2, the all-whites, it's an underrated look. I'm glad they didn't put in here the midnight green helmet, the white jersey, and the green pants. Like, I call that the slow uniform. They just look slow and unathletic in that jersey. I know most people don't like the all whites. It reminds them of the preseason. It reminds them of that 2014 season with Chip Kelly when Nike wasn't ready to have the midnight green home jerseys until halfway through the year. So every game the Eagles were wearing the all whites because they didn't have the midnight green color yet, which is insane looking back on. But I like those. I think watching Saquon Barkley break the record against the Rams, that was incredible in those uniforms. So I will say too, I want the Eagles to let's start getting some different combinations with pants, like for the green and black jerseys. The green jerseys, they always wear white pants. Give me the black pants. Give me the green, the all greens, an all green midnight green game would be awesome. Number 7, I want to see that in 2025. Number 9 is interesting too. Like the black jersey with the green pants. If you want to use the green helmet or the black helmet, I think that's cool. I want to see them do everything. They, honestly, in the early 2010s, it wasn't all black. It wasn't black jersey, black pants. A lot of the times they would wear the black jersey and the white pants. Like, that's a cool idea as well. I think the Eagles have the best combination of jerseys in the NFL, and I think they got to just use them all. And now that the NFL is year after year loosening their strict rules on uniforms, I want to see the Eagles go all in. They're definitely trying different combinations year after year. This year, on my wish list, I would love the 90s away Kelly greens. And then if I can get an all green look or just the home jerseys with a different pant color, black or green, perfect. That's a beautiful combination for me in 2025. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On NFL Draft podcast with Damian Parsons and Keith Sanchez, getting you ready for the NFL Draft like no one else does. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks as always for tuning in, downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.